This week on Full Circle Florida, the Republican Civil War, the governor versus the state legislature, and now the issue that is dividing them, immigration, and who should have the power to enforce the new laws that the governor wants, aimed at cracking down on migrants. What it now reveals about the new power dynamics in Tallahassee and what it means for you. President Trump's immigration raids, people being rounded up all over the country. What is the immediate impact? Is it going too fast? And what happens next? My conversation this week with immigration attorney Michelle Sanz Rodriguez and what she's seeing on the front lines. Deep seek or deep fake, the shakeup in the AI world this week. Is it much to do about nothing, or is it exactly what the U.S. needs to win the future? Tech expert Jon Shultz with key insight into the next space race. And a fast and furious start to the Trump presidency, from the immigration raids to the freeze on federal funds, the buyout offer for government employees, and politicizing the D.C. plane crash. Does the president have a plan, or is it all just about creating chaos and confusion? Our panel is here with the debate and the discussion. Welcome in here to Full Circle Florida, everyone, and we do begin here this week with the power struggle that's playing out in Tallahassee between Governor Ron DeSantis and the state legislature. Capitol reporter Forrest Saunders with the family feud that is now growing inside the Republican Party.
We in Florida have taken the issue of illegal immigration very seriously.
Governor Ron DeSantis on the road again, bashing the legislature for the Trump Act.
A very, very grotesque, weak piece of legislation.
It's that immigration bill passed Tuesday, which DeSantis vows to veto for being too weak and too fast.
They churned it out. The members didn't have time to read the bill. This is like Nancy Pelosi. You pass the bill to find out what is in the bill.
The fight, in large part, centers on tapping the state's ag commissioner to be chief immigration enforcer.
They left from Cuba and going to Miami.
DeSantis calls it unconstitutional and says it's going to force state officials to get permission to act. That's as the House and Senate leaders say they wanted an elected post, not an appointee.
We are able to hold him accountable. You know who you can't hold accountable? Some bureaucrat that is appointed to do this job by Governor Ron DeSantis.
House Speaker Danny Perez, like DeSantis, now doing interview after interview, but this time to defend the bill, including this town hall with Florida Republican leaders. He calls the infighting a disagreement, not a feud, but keeps offering barbs like this.
Over 80 Republicans elected by the people are all weak and are all rhinos. Yet the man that's calling us that a year ago was trying to convince us that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, should have never been nominated by the people to be the Republican nominee.
And this war of words isn't just on camera, it's online, too. Emails from the RPOF encouraging support of the Trump Act, petitions calling for the House Speaker to be recalled, and on YouTube, spoofs lampooning the governor.
Introducing DeSantita, the magical pill for those who thought they'd be living in the White House but are now stuck in the doghouse.
For Democrats,
you know, we all grew up learning that there is give and take, there are vetoes, there are overrides. This is actually part of democracy.
It could be an inroad to partner with Republican lawmakers and accomplish some big bipartisan goals.
Yeah, I think individually, selfishly as a caucus, you know, this is where we can make some moves and negotiate and leverage. But really, at the end of the day, it's not a one-off sort of policy decision in a vacuum. This is about a major and important problem that's important to Republicans, of course, that's what they campaigned on, but to NPAs and to Democrats.
Though others worry big-ticket items like condo and insurance reform might get hamstrung by a legislative logjam. That's as some Republicans say they're now looking at Governor Ron DeSantis, his staff, and online presence.
I'm curious to see how much of that is actual governor staff and how much is paid bots, that might be part of the governor's PC, perchance.
What happens next is unclear. The optics definitely don't look good, but can this relationship be mended in time for March? Florida finds out over the next 4 weeks.
Meanwhile, as President Trump's immigration raids unfold across the country, I wanted to check in with an immigration attorney who's now on the front lines of these mass deportations. Here's my conversation this week with Michelle Sanz Rodriguez.
All illegal entry will immediately...
What are you seeing right now on the front lines of immigration? What are you hearing from your clients, and how is President Trump's policies having an immediate impact on immigration in America?
Okay, well, I have two sectors of clients. So I've got my employers who are worried about their workforce because a lot of people aren't showing up to work. And then I have families who are worried about their well-being and what's going to happen next and rates. So it's had an incredible impact kind of on all sectors of my clientele, my business. And it did have an immediate impact. So right now we see fear, anxiety, stress for all levels. And of course, it's been going crazy for me. I can't even keep up with the phone calls.
The narrative, at least that's being pushed by the White House and the Trump administration, is that they're going after the sort of the criminal element. Is that what you're seeing, or some of the people that are getting swept up in these raids, they haven't committed a crime other than perhaps being in the country illegally?
Well, I think in theory, that's what they want the narrative to be, but I'm not sure that's how the narrative has been carried out. Because no matter how hard you try, once you do a raid, there's collateral arrests that have to happen. And we've seen that by example, the restaurant in Newark, where an American veteran ended up getting caught up in a raid. We don't know who they were looking for or what the target was, but it's inevitable. When you start doing large scale raids, then people get stopped and everybody has to get checked. And so you can say criminals, but at the end of the day, everyone is exposed and the risk is high. So we are seeing a lot of people that are not criminals that have been here for many, many years get caught up in these operations, because now they've also been given a quota that every office has to have between 1,200 and 1,500 arrests or detainees per day. So there's a lot of pressure also on the field offices of ICE to make sure they meet the numbers.
Where do you see this going next? Could these raids evolve and unfold in the months ahead and spread out even further than what they already are? I think people probably reasonably assume that this process was not going to be completely perfect and could be messy. Do you see it getting messier?
We do see it getting messier, because what we're seeing every day, there's something new, a new directive that's coming out. So I think what's hard for the general public to understand is an executive order is not a law. You can't rule by executive order. You can't administer the law by executive order. All of that it's the president's agenda. It's a wish list. And so he is ordering his administration, the Department of Homeland Security, and in turn, ICE, to go out and do what he wants.
What do you see being the fallout for the American people? How might we feel this?
Well, I think we're already seeing it. So what we see is we're going to see people that are going to be running scared. And so we have people that aren't showing up to work. We have children that aren't going to school. And you're going to see immediate downsides to that. If construction workers don't show up to construction sites, then houses don't get built. If our agricultural workers can't show up to do their job, then we're not going to have food on our table. If hospitality workers don't show up to do their job, then all of that is passed on to the consumer, and we're going to see that in our prices right away.
Michelle Saenz-Rodriguez, thank you for your insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next on Full Circle Florida, deep seek or deep fake, the new frontier in the world of artificial intelligence. Welcome back to Full Circle Florida. Steve Jobs once said, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. Well, right now, it's hard to tell which is which or who is who in the world of artificial intelligence. Technology expert Jon Shultz on the wake-up call that came from China this week. Do we know for sure if this DeepSeek company is actually telling the truth about its technology? China doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to transparency or even the truth. They're at best a U.S. rival, if not a low-key enemy. How do we know this isn't being exaggerated?
Well, we really don't know, Paul, and that's the thing that will basically in the coming days and weeks. I think more and more information is coming out. I've been trying to stay abreast of everything that's been going on. You know, David Sachs, the czar that Trump has appointed, has come out and said that they copied OpenAI's architecture and used that from a learning perspective. You know, in the tech world, we always think of things that are better, bigger, faster, and cheaper. And we know that basically they've come out and said it's cheaper. We don't know if it's better.
With everything that's going on with TikTok, does anyone really think the U.S. would allow Chinese AI to even be a thing in America, let alone dominate?
Well, I have serious concerns that U.S. will allow this to happen. And I have really serious concerns that the tech industry will allow it to happen. You know, one of the things that I've learned and heard from some of my peers in the industry is AI is a great tool. It's more simplistic than what most people believe it to be. It's just a faster way of processing data, everything that we understand and know. The future holds the ability for eventually computers to think, but that's way off in the distance. So I'm not so concerned about that. What I am concerned about is the privacy and security.
The fact that NVIDIA now has this sort of perceived competition, why might that be a good thing? Is this kind of like the space race when Russia was beating us in the first few years in the 60s? They beat us to space with the Sputnik. Is this a wake-up call moment for the U.S. to make sure they dominate the AI race?
Well, I think if you look at historically about the U.S. is great at innovation. And from a standpoint of a geopolitical environment, a lot of these other countries are great imitators. So I believe that the U.S. will continue to dominate the innovation piece. In regards to the competition, NVIDIA already has competition out there from other chip manufacturers. And that's what's really kind of interesting is DeepSeek used NVIDIA chips out there, albeit they were not the current chips available from NVIDIA. But I see that other chip manufacturers like AMD and a few others out there will actually give NVIDIA competition from that standpoint.
Originate, innovate, and own the future. Jon Shultz, thank you for your insight. Appreciate it, sir. Coming up next on Full Circle Florida, White House whiplash, the fast and furious start to the second Trump presidency. Welcome back to Full Circle Florida. Let's bring in our panel this week. Our legal expert, former Assistant District Attorney Janae Thomas is back with us. And of course, our political analyst, Dr. Susan MacManus. Okay, where do we begin in the world of Trump? Let's start with immigration. The raids almost in a blitz-like fashion happening all over the country, deportations. It seems to be some confusion over who exactly is getting caught up in the dragnet. We hear reporting that people who were essentially living, lives where they were productive members of society, but they were here illegally, are being arrested, detained, deported. So Susan, I'll start with you. Is President Trump moving too fast? There's a lot that's being thrown at the public all of a sudden on this particular issue.
There was a really good poll that came out this week with the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center, which shows 2/3 of Americans are definitely in favor of deporting illegals. And over 50% are in favor of importing them even if they didn't commit a crime. So he's simply, in some ways, he promised he was going to do this. This was the #1 issue in all the polls. But now, of course, the same poll shows that people are not necessarily in favor of going into schools and churches and things of that nature.
There's so much that we don't know exactly how this is going to be impacting us, say in 6, 7, 8 months with the workforce, particularly in agriculture, let's say. I guess it just depends on how this is carried out over time. Janae, legal question for you here. If someone is deported and their only crime is being undocumented, which I know there are people out there that would say, look, that's the whole entire thing that we're talking about. But let's say they're working, they're being productive members of society, the classic immigrant story. What is their legal path or recourse under the new Trump administration?
So what we've been seeing in the past was an asylum defense. That's what everybody's claiming as they're coming over here. But now that people are being deported in mass numbers, we're going to have to see if that is even a possible recourse. We saw under Joe Biden, he created legal pathways to citizenship. However, it seems like all of those are going to go away under the Trump administration, and he's going to create all new rules.
I know immigration attorneys are having a hard time with this. They're being flooded with phone calls. We spoke to one in the show that you'll hear from, but you heard from earlier. But meanwhile, the Trump White House offering a freeze on federal funding. That was another big development this week for programs that range from Meals on Wheels to hurricane relief. And then amid all the confusion, the White House rescinds the freeze, but then the White House press secretary said the freeze was still in effect. So you've got this sort of confusion, chaos. Is this what we should be expecting with the second Trump term? Or is it, look, you've got to break some eggs to make the omelet, and there's going to be some short-term stuff you got to deal with?
Well, what we know for sure is in a rush to do things to show that you're keeping promises. There was a lot of inattention to detail, as you would say, on this one. Once people got a hold of the list that it was applicable to that did not include Social Security and other these things, but meanwhile, people were afraid. You heard news, and by all accounts, the Republicans in Congress have said, and the president to a certain extent, we were too broad, we were not detailed enough, and we scared a lot of people, frankly.
Yeah, and then I know the buck stops with the president, but you wonder how much of that was him. He gave the order, and how much his underlings, left hand not talking to the right hand and communicating. Our legal expert here, Janae, before the White House rescinded the funding freeze, a federal judge blocked it. It was the legal warfare going after your opponents. Now it's sort of legal warfare with Trump issuing these orders, federal judges saying, hey, not so fast. Is that what the next 4 years is going to be? Much like DeSantis had to deal with in the state of Florida.
For sure. I definitely think at least at the beginning, while we're getting all of these executive orders pushed out at once, the attention to detail not being there, we're going to see a lot of that in the beginning, but hopefully the goal is some of these details will be worked out as they go through the process. Well,
in a way, it is a check and balance. I mean, people are worried about that. I mean, the Supreme Court could be the ultimate decider, and there's no guarantee the Supreme Court's always going to side with Donald Trump. Let's talk about the tragic plane crash in D.C. Before we even knew what happened, the president sort of pointed the finger at DEI programs and President Biden. What do you think? How is the public going to digest that, Susan? Is Trump playing his cards too aggressively, too quickly on that? Is he already overdoing it in Trump style?
Well, a lot of people felt that he should have been more sympathetic to the people whose loved ones have passed away and so forth, and he jumped fast. But on the other hand, there has been a lot of data that shows that there have been near misses all over the country and that our whole airline system is needing work. So it depends on what the people right now, they don't care about the politics. What they care about most are the poor people who lost their lives.
I know he's only been in office for 2 weeks. If you're doing he wanted to show he's going to hit the ground running and do all these things, all these executive orders, but you wonder, does he have a plan? Is there intention behind this? Is there an architect here with a vision, or is it just stir the pot, create chaos, and let the chips fall where they may?
No one can have a plan that's set in cement with the tumultuous nature of our society. The issues change, technology changes, circumstances, all of it. He clearly wants to downsize government. We know that. That's number one. And I think that's probably, if I had to say what's the overriding plan right now, it's that, but it's the implementation that's certainly uncertain.
It's not necessarily the what, it's the how. Right. I mean, you could make that argument with Democrats and Republicans.
Of course.
What people might agree with, it's how you do it. All right, stay with us. When we come back, our final thoughts on the week that was and the week ahead. All right, welcome back in here to Full Circle Florida. Final thoughts on this week and what you're looking forward to next week at the confirmation hearings still happening, Susan.
Oh, absolutely. And the three most contentious ones from the get-go are on the dais, so to speak.
Patel, Kennedy, and Gabbard.
Yeah,
Which
right.
one of those do you think could have a problem, or are all three going to get in?
It depends, but everybody right now is speculating of the three that Gabbard might have the most problems, followed by
Kennedy.
RFK and then Patel. But who knows? Strange things happen between now and when they vote.
They passed Hegseth, so we'll see what happens. But all right, legally, it's sort of open season. I mean, again, going back to your question, is this how it's going to play out? Do you expect more legal challenges every move that Trump makes?
Absolutely. We're going to see the courts being very busy over the next 4 years trying to iron out all of these executive orders, all of these confirmations, everything. They're going to be a long way.
It's almost like another branch of government. I mean, obviously you have the Supreme Court, but even beneath that, all the district courts and the federal courts.
Absolutely.
There's a lot going on. All right, guys, thank you for being here, helping to explain all of this. Thank you for watching us here on Full Circle Florida. We hope you'll join us again next week, and make sure to add our free 24/7 streaming news channel, ABC Action News Plus. There you will find all the in-depth reports on the stories that matter to you. Have a great week.